Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. In this webinar, we will talk about DevOps transformation starts with you, the leader. My name is Coco Lee. I am the marketing manager of DASA. Today, I will be your host and moderator. I'm so pleased to be joined by Tomasz Pająk, our DASA ambassador in Poland. Hi, Tomasz.
Hi everyone. I'm really pleased to be part of the webinar.
Can you please take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yes. So as you introduced me, I'm a DASA ambassador in Poland. So I'm helping local community in adopting best practices to build high IT performing organizations. I do it mainly via Conway Law, where I'm a DevOps and Agile lead, where we help customers by training and consulting how to build high performance IT organizations. And apart from that, on daily basis, I am responsible for engineering at DNA Technology. This is a Swedish-Polish company, which on one hand develops startups, and on the other hand helps large enterprises to do digital transformation by DevOps transformation as one of the factors. So that's about me. That's my experience. Formerly, I used to be a software engineer, so I come from software engineering world. I used to program a lot. I used to be an architect. Now I'm responsible for building whole organization, which includes culture, process, technology, automation, metrics, etc. So thanks. That's all as far as my introduction is concerned.
Yeah, thank you so much, Thomas. If you have any questions during the webinar or after the webinar, please put them in the question text box on the right side of your screen. We will follow them up. So for those of you who join us for the first time, let me do a quick introduction. DASA is an open source association that has built a competence model and accreditation scheme for DevOps training and certification. We are an open and independent association that is working with more than 300 partners that include training and consulting companies, corporates, ambassadors, and content development teams. Organizations use the DASA model and instruments and work together, further enhancing these instruments to support DevOps journeys of organization. Thomas, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Thank you. So the agenda for today is as follows. First of all, I would like to discuss with you the leadership styles and which one are typical for traditional organizations and which one for high performance IT organizations. And once we discuss this, we'll move towards how leader influence or may influence architecture, deployment strategies, infrastructure, talent management, and organization itself. I would like to visualize it with certain examples from Netflix, Facebook, or Amazon. And once we are done with that, I will summarize it and give you some hints. What, at least to my experience and DASA's experience, is crucial to build high performance IT organization. So that's the agenda for today. So I'd like to invite you to look at the video I recorded during the simulation game, the Phoenix Project, which is based on the book by the same title. This is a simulation where a team of people tries to make their company back again leader on the market by transforming IT. So let's play the video, and I would like you to pay attention to a person on the left-hand side. Let's press play. Please take a look at the person in this reddish t-shirt. Actually, he is a leader. He is like setting priorities and telling people what they should do. And that's what happens at round 2. The simulation consists of 4 rounds. And let's take a look at round 4, which the very same person during the game, he transformed his leadership style based on what happened during the game. So let's take a look at round number 4. It is the last round in the game. Let's press play. If you look now, the people are self-organized. Actually, the flow is, by the way, visualized, or the value stream, and you can see that person is no longer in the center of attention. People at the whiteboard, they are making decisions about priorities, what is best to achieve business goals. It's something different which was shown during on the first video. So now let's compare those 2 leadership styles. So that was the leader during round 2, and actually there is, or you can say there is no leader in round 4, which is actually not the case. It's not that the leader is lacking, the leadership style changed. So the leader in round 2, this is more like command and control kind of person. So this person is micromanaging work, is giving priorities. Everyone is looking at what this person decides. That's a leadership style typical for traditional organizations. Whereas the second type of leader, he or she uses mission and delegates a lot. So people are given a mission, they are given a context, and they have boundaries of autonomy where they can make the best possible decisions. And this kind of leadership is transformational. So it helps people, or those leaders help people to become more mature, that people are able to take more autonomy and responsibility. And such a solution scales in a sense that if there is one single point of control and coordination, such system cannot scale efficiently because all people depend on one person. And that's the difference in leadership styles, which you can observe in traditional organizations, which is command and control, and delegation type of organization, or delegation type of leadership in high-performing IT organizations. This is exactly what happens, or what we grasp at DASA in our competence model, that every team member actually is leader and should have appropriate leadership skills. So if we want to build teams in high-performing IT organization, they should have all the named knowledge areas and skill areas developed at the basic level. And this is what we try to address with our fundamentals course. That by everyone understanding the basics of all different 12 areas, they can understand different roles on a proficient level. So for instance, I can be a leader and I can be proficient at team building and leadership, while others can be proficient at programming or continuous delivery. I will get back to the model later on. So now let's talk about architecture and how leaders can influence architecture. When I try to help companies in transforming from a traditional type to high-performing ones, one of the things I hear is that all those cool companies like Amazon or Netflix or Spotify, they don't have legacy systems, which is exactly not true, because if you look at Amazon, they've been in the business for more than 20 years. And if you look at the journey, their first system was a pure monolith. Then they transformed the monolith into a kind of service-oriented architecture. And eventually they transformed it into microservices architecture. And this transformation of architecture took them 20 years. Please also remember that Amazon is the biggest credit card processor in the world. So at the same time, they're subject to regulations like PCI DSS constraints, which has serious impact on the way you could deliver things to production environment. So such companies like Amazon succeed. And why did they do it? Especially when it took them 20 years to have at least three generations of architecture. It's because they took advantage of something which is called Conway Law. But before I move to that, let me speak about Spotify. This is a desktop player of Spotify. Actually, it is not a single you shouldn't treat it as a single piece of software, because this is an embedded browser which displays different web applications. So there is one application for displaying the menu, more or less. There is a web application responsible for displaying friend activity, other for the contents like recently played, and the other web application for the player. And the key thing here is that because this piece of software or this system is divided into separate web application, it allows an organization to build teams around them. So there is a separate team responsible for the player, separate team responsible for friends activity, for user profile, etc. This allows those teams, or this architecture allows those teams to move independently. So deploy things to production independently, test independently, etc. And this granulation is pretty crucial. And this takes advantage of the Conway's Law, which is organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations. So if we get back to the Spotify example, the fact that teams are responsible end-to-end, which is one of the DASA core principles, allows those teams to move independently. And without architecture supporting this, it's not possible. If they had a monolith, then one team is very dependent on the other team because they commit things to the same code base. They need to verify more heavily on any possible regression errors, etc. So this is how leaders can influence architecture. If they move organization towards a more granular architecture, very often called microservices architecture, although it's not the only solution, then it allows teams to be more independent of each other, move autonomously, and be able to take end-to-end responsibility. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about deployment strategies. This is an example from back 2007, which is a pretty old example, when Facebook was mostly web browser social media service. They were considering building a chat client, which today is a messenger. And the biggest challenge in chat, especially in the web environment, is actually not messaging itself, but ability to present that your friends are either active or idle. So being able to present the green dot next to their names. In the web environment, it means that the web browser, especially if there are no WebSockets, means that the web browser will query the backend every second if a friend of yours is active or idle. And how Facebook approached this problem? Back then, they had 70 million daily active users. For sure, they had no infrastructure to be able to perform load testing. And actually, the highest risk they identified was: is our solution scaled enough to serve 70 million daily active users? So what they did from day one, or from the very beginning of building the backend for chat functionality, they put it on production, and they embedded in the code of the Facebook website a dummy client, chat client, which emulated messages sent by users and emulated checking statuses of their friend. However, it was not visible for end users. So from the very beginning, people logging into Facebook website, they didn't know that, but they were taking part in load test of the solution which was built. To my best knowledge, the solution was being built for a year, and throughout the whole year, every time the messaging backend was updated, real users were testing it without knowing this. Once the engineers were sure that it works, they just changed one CSS class, and suddenly the chat client popped up on the right-hand side, and all the users were able to use the messaging functionality without any downtime, without any problems. And this is a DevOps strategy or a deployment strategy called dark launch. This requires leadership, helping teams to play with risk, and requires leadership skills to focus attention of teams on collecting feedback as early as possible. Otherwise, in traditional scenario, what would happen is that if this project was done in a traditional way, the team would analyze the solution, would try to build this, would make load tests, would after a year put it on production, and wait if it crashes or not. And this is not the case. This is not how high-performing IT organizations do. They try to collect customer feedback as early as possible, and that's how leaders can try to help teams search for it. Okay, so that was deployment strategies. Now let's talk about another example of resilient infrastructures and a case from Amazon. So what Amazon is known of in the engineering world is the chaos monkey, or as a tool, or Siemens army in general. So what Amazon did, or sorry, Netflix did, even though they were running on cloud, which was Amazon at the time, they knew that still cloud may fail. So what they did is, on their production infrastructure, they run a tool which they developed and then open sourced called Chaos Monkey. And the Chaos Monkey, what it does, it enters an infrastructure and randomly tries to put different elements of infrastructure down, like web server or a database or master database server, or for instance, a load balancer. By doing so, they were trying to figure out if, first of all, they can identify that something is down. Second of all, if the infrastructure or the system can auto-heal itself. And when I talk about this example to different companies like telco companies or banks, they just cannot imagine that you can do it in production. But actually what Netflix said is, we are not interested if our infrastructure is resilient in staging environment, we are interested if it's resilient on production environment. And there were cases where certain regions in Amazon cloud went down and Netflix was the only service which survived the crash, because they were able to, while it happened, to rebuild the infrastructure in other regions. So this is a very DevOps approach, but we are not waiting for a crash to happen. We are putting ourselves in a situation, maybe not a perfect comfort one, but still trying to anticipate errors and verify if we can sustain crashes and that our application can survive. This is very much about leadership, because it means that we can play with the risk and we can have courage to admit that maybe at the moment we are not ready for crash, but we are actively counterfighting it and not waiting while we are surprised, I don't know, on Sunday at night. Let's move on. Let's speak about talent management. When Netflix at the conference, they were speaking about this approach, one of the CTOs from Fortune 100 companies said, but hey, we can't copy Netflix because it has all those superstar engineers. We don't have the people. What an engineering director from Netflix said, look, we hired them from you and got out of their way. This is very much about leadership, that the role of leaders is to support engineers, because they have, provided that they were given the context and different perspectives, they have the knowledge how to build systems and how to react to different situations. So maybe it's not about shortage of talent, which we are missing, but it's maybe about environment which we as leaders create for certain behaviors to flourish. And there's lots of wisdom in those words by a Netflix engineering director, that it is the culture which helps people invent brilliant things. Okay, let's move on. And this is what DASA is trying to grasp in our competence framework. It's maybe instead of having specialist roles or I-shaped roles like a developer, release manager, solution designer, etc., maybe we should focus on creating teams with T-shaped people. By meaning T-shaped people means that every team member understands on a basic level what a business analyst should do or what release manager should do, and is still specialized in their area. But only by such multi-skilled team, we are able as a team to take end-to-end responsibility and not only think about how to develop our solution as fast as possible, but also how to make it more testable, how to make it more deployable, how to make it more monitorable, etc. And such multi-skilled team is a core concept for DASA as a way of building high-performing IT organization. So now let's talk about serious business or the organization. When talking about approach to building such organizations, one of the CEO of a bank said to me, but you know, Netflix, Spotify, or Amazon, these are tech companies and non-financial institutions. And this could be right, but luckily there's an example of agile and DevOps transformation happening at ING headquarters, where CEO in its interview for McKinsey said that we came to the realization that ultimately we are a technology company in the financial services business. So where we could learn being a best-in-class technology company? The answer was not other banks, but real tech firms. And this is what I, at least that's my experience, observe that you may be in a pharmaceutical business, you may be in telco business, or you may be in a banking business. But the mindset that we are a technology company, for instance, with financial license, changes a lot. Because suddenly this is IT, which is no longer a cost center, but a competitive advantage center. That this is IT which helps organizations to move faster. And this is what has been already proved by State of DevOps report, which I recommend reading. All right. And to achieve that, this is our experience at DASA, that this requires business leadership. That's why we have two dedicated trainings, one for a leader and one for a coach, which I recommend you to become familiar with, where we help teams and organizations to transform in the right direction and just provide necessary organization development skills. And this cannot happen, as I mentioned, that's our experience, without leadership present at different levels in organization. That's why we have DASA DevOps Product Owner certification, DASA DevOps Leader certification, and DevOps Code certifications, which of course is backed up by training, where on different levels and different initiatives, people can work with companies. All right. So let's move on. And why do we speak about leadership? It's because according to our experience, however hard technological change is, it is the culture and working with culture as the most important thing during the transformation. That's why having leaders educated enough, having certain knowledge and skills is crucial to drive the change. That's why they're essential for DevOps success. That's why it is essential that those people helping in transformation, like product owner, like leader or coach, can talk with senior management and assist them and help them in running the transformation. So let's summarize it. If I were to summarize what I said into two different leadership styles, I would say that the one, as I mentioned, is direct and transactional. And typical behavioral trends for that leadership is we require people to be obedient, to comply. There are formal ways of communicating, and basically we solve problems by centralization. So me as a leader, I should be a great coordinator, and a great controller. And this is based on an assumption that work is predictable and deterministic. And there's other leadership style. This style is based mostly on delegating. So my role as a leader is to provide as much perspective or as many perspectives as possible, so that a team has all the context they can have to make best possible decisions. And typical behavioral trends for such leadership style is self-discipline, is taking initiative, is being rather informal than formal, and decentralization. So instead of relying on single roles in organization, we rely on autonomous teams which try to become high-performing. And this is all based on the fact that the world is rather unpredictable and probabilistic. And the main point about, from my experience about transformation is that even if you're a seasoned leader, successful leader, most probably the former leadership style made you successful. And the key challenge is that most probably in the new world, in the new complex world, which is more unpredictable and probabilistic, you should unlearn what made you successful so far. And what you should do is try to learn new skills, which are more tailored to current challenges. Just to give an example, banks are being challenged by disruptive startups. This is what happened in the world, and banks become successful because they mastered the previous way of working, which was successful, for instance, 10 years ago. But currently, to be in the game and not to get disrupted, they need to change their mindset, leadership styles, and way of working to still be high performing. So my message to you is, if you identify yourself as having the previous leadership style, so my message is good luck in unlearning things and learning new things. Now it's time for questions. So if you have any, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, let me have a look. We have got some questions. Let me read the first one. What is the biggest challenge, according to you, for a leader in the DevOps transformation?
I think I touched that topic during my presentation. From my perspective, this is the cultural aspect of transformation. As it was said before by management gurus, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So whatever transformation or change you are planning to drive, if the culture is not there, most probably you will fail, or the risk is high you will fail. So addressing the culture, respecting current culture, and planning how to influence the change in culture should be crucial. And this is the biggest challenge. I've seen a lot that cultural transformation was driven like a project and not like an evolutionary thing. So that's my answer.
Okay, great. With what should I start as a leader in the DevOps transformation?
Of course, depending what leader are you, so where in the organization you are. I would get back to basically this slide, where I would start as a leader. I would start with identifying what kind of leadership style I have. Am I more like a direct and transactional leader? Does it mean that I assume that the world is predictable and deterministic, which means that I expect people to be just obedient to what I say and just comply with my decisions? If I identify this, maybe I should start thinking about my assumptions. That maybe we are actually living in a complex world where we deal more with unpredictable things happening. Then maybe I should change my leadership style to delegation. and count on decentralization as a way of dealing with complex problems. So definitely I would start with diagnosing myself as a leader, which kind of assumptions I have and trends in my behavior there are. Okay, next question.
Okay, the last question is, what type of transformation do you recommend, evolution or revolution?
I think the same question applies to agile transformation. Basically, I think there is no one single answer. Revolution sounds like disrespecting the history of organization, why the organization is in a place where it is. And revolution, usually you have only one chance. You either succeed or fail. Whereas evolution gives you chances to experiment, to observe what happens, and react to it. So, of course, it depends on the context of the company, but I would more go into an evolution and design experiments which help me to learn or discover things which couldn't have been discovered just by pure analysis. So for instance, if you're a big organization, maybe we should search for a team with early adopters, with attractive culture, and try to do a DevOps transformation there, observe the outcomes, discover constraints, and try to move forward to another part of organization, being wiser with the lessons we learned. So basically, I would go into an evolutionary mode, but of course there may be some business constraints that we don't have time for that, and maybe it's a matter of survival where maybe revolution is the only option. And some people may, of course, reject that, but hey, we need to survive. I hope this answers the question.
Okay. Great.
Are those all questions so far?
Yes, yes. If you still have questions, you always can email us. We will follow them up. Let me take this opportunity to thank you, Thomas, for joining me today. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us today in this webinar. Have a great day. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.